You go to bed tonight, pull up your blanket, and scroll your phone for 20 minutes before falling asleep. Now strip away the blanket, the phone, the bed, the walls, everything, and put yourself in a dark forest wrapped in animal skin, listening to something large moving in the bushes 20 feet away. That was every single night for our ancestors. So what did they actually do when the sun went down? We spend a third of our entire lives asleep, and almost nobody stops to think about how different that experience was for 99% of human history. Before we had fire under control, before we had tools worth bragging about, early humans faced a simple, terrifying problem. Half of every day was complete darkness. Not streetlight through your curtains darkness. Full, crushing, existential darkness, the kind where you hold your hand in front of your face and see nothing. Where every snapped twig becomes a potential emergency. And in that darkness, things hunted. Lions, hyenas, leopards, saber-toothed cats, almost every major predator of the ancient world is most active at dawn, dusk, and through the night. Which means when the sun went down, early humans went from hunter to a reasonably nutritious snack option for something with much better night vision. So what did you do? You grouped up. You found somewhere high, somewhere enclosed, somewhere defensible. Caves were premium real estate not because early humans loved damp stone walls, but because a cave has one entrance. You put your back to the rock, and you always know exactly which direction danger is coming from. It's basically the first security system. And it worked. Groups slept close together, sharing body heat, close enough to hear each other breathe. It wasn't cozy in the modern sense, but there was real safety in numbers that went beyond just defense. Someone was always a light sleeper. Someone always stirred. Someone was always, deliberately or not, keeping a kind of watch. Then, somewhere around 400,000 years ago, everything changed. Fire. The moment early humans gained reliable control over it, the entire dynamic of the night shifted. Fire keeps you warm. Yes, it lets you cook food, which dramatically improves nutrition. But more than any of that, it creates a boundary, a circle of light. A psychological wall between you and the dark that is somehow completely real. Most large predators won't cross into firelight, not because fire physically stops them, but because they evolved to hunt in darkness. And an open flame is a disruption, an anomaly. Sitting next to a fire, you were safer from predation not through strength or speed, but through light itself. Here's what doesn't get talked about enough. Fire didn't just protect early humans from predators. It transformed what human beings actually were. Think about what happens around a fire you can't read, you can't write, you can't send a passive-aggressive email to a coworker. You can't be productive in any modern sense. What you can do is sit, look at each other, and actually be present with the people around you, in the most complete sense of that phrase. Researchers studying modern hunter-gatherer societies groups, like the Juhoansi of the Kalahari Desert and the Hadza of Tanzania, have found something remarkable. Daytime conversation in these communities is mostly practical. Who's hunting where, what needs gathering, social coordination, the ancient equivalent of a Monday morning briefing. Nighttime conversation is completely different. At night, around the fire, people tell stories, long, elaborate, emotionally rich, morally layered stories about ancestors, about the world's creation, about what it means to be brave, generous, a person worth knowing. Roughly 80% of all nighttime campfire conversation in hunter-gatherer societies is storytelling, compared to only about 6% during the day. Read that again. During the day, logistics, during the night, stories, every single evening for tens of thousands of years. Human beings sat around fires and narrated the world to each other, doing exactly what we still do on streaming platforms, in novels, in every film ever made, trying to make sense of existence through character and conflict and consequence. The campfire was the cinema. The storyteller was the screen. And because stories are how culture transmits itself, how values get passed down, how history survives, how identity gets built across generations without writing, without books, without any external storage medium at all, fire may have been the single most important catalyst for the development of language, empathy, cultural memory, and complex social bonding in all of human evolutionary history. Sitting around a fire telling stories might be the reason we became the kind of creature that can imagine things that don't exist yet. Not bad for a bunch of people in animal skins. Now, about sleep, because this genuinely might change how you feel about waking up at Thram. Most of us assume the normal way to sleep is 8 straight hours, one uninterrupted block. And that waking at 3 a.m. and failing to fall back asleep means something's wrong, cue the anxious spiral, into a search engine rabbit hole, diagnosing yourself with 3 disorders by 4 a.m. Here's the thing, that assumption might be historically backwards. A historian named Roger Eckerk spent decades combing through thousands of historical documents, private diaries, medical texts, court records, literature, household accounts, and found that for most of human history, going back at least to medieval times and almost certainly much further, people didn't sleep in one block. They slept in 2. It was called first sleep and second sleep. You'd go to bed a couple hours after dark, sleep 3 to 4 hours, wake up naturally and calmly the way you might surface from a pleasant daydream, stay awake for an hour or 2, then drift back to sleep until morning. This isn't a fringe theory. References to first and second sleep appear across cultures and centuries with remarkable consistency, going back to Homer's Odyssey, mentioned matter-of-factly in Roman texts, saturating medieval literature. A 16th century French physician actually recommended couples conceive children during that waking window, since people were more relaxed and alert. The phrase "the watch in the night," which shows up constantly in old texts in the Bible, often simply meant this ordinary waking period rather than a military watch. Household accounts mention tasks performed between the 2 sleeps as unremarkable, everyday events. And what did people do during that waking window? Everything. They prayed. Many traditions considered the quiet hours between midnight and dawn the most sacred time for communication with the divine. They thought about their dreams, taken far more seriously as meaningful events than we take them today. They had sex apparently considered an excellent time for it. Body warm and relaxed, nowhere else to be. They tended the fire, adding logs to keep the heat through the cold hours. Farmers checked on livestock, mothers nursed infants. Some people even visited neighbors in the dark streets between the 2 sleeps, perfectly ordinary. Because it wasn't insomnia. It wasn't a malfunction. It was just the night existing in phases, the way it always had a pattern that almost certainly collapsed once artificial lighting let us push bedtime later and compress our sleep into one longer block. So if you've ever woken up at 3 a.m., felt strangely calm and clear-headed, lain there thinking for an hour before drifting back, you're not broken. You're not developing a disorder. You're, in the most literal sense, prehistoric. Your body remembered something it was never supposed to forget. Let's go further back, because the deeper you look into ancient sleep, the more impressive it gets. Early Homo sapiens didn't have beds, but they didn't just flop down on bare rock either. Archaeological evidence from Border Cave in South Africa suggests that as far back as 200,000 years ago, humans were constructing deliberate sleeping platforms, layers of grasses and leaves. And beneath those layers, researchers found ash, deliberately spread, not accidental. Why? Because ash repels insects, ticks, mites, fleas, the things that bite you while you sleep and can transmit disease. Someone 200,000 years ago noticed that a layer of ash under the bedding kept the bugs away, tested it, confirmed it worked, and taught it to others. That's the scientific method running in a prehistoric human brain, applied to the simple problem of sleeping more comfortably. In colder climates, Ice Age Europe and Central Asia, the challenge shifted from insects to cold that could kill an unprotected person in hours. The response was communal sleeping, groups pressed together as a kind of living insulation. And researchers think the natural variation in how deeply different people sleep may have been an evolutionary feature. Not a flaw. A group where everyone slept equally deeply was a group that got eaten. A group with a mix of light and deep sleepers had effectively rotating sentinels, with nobody having to suffer through deliberate night watch. And the night wasn't only about survival. For nearly every ancient culture on Earth, it was the most spiritually charged part of the entire cycle of existence, which makes intuitive sense. The sun died every evening and had to fight its way back. Every sunrise was a small victory, every night a vigil. The Maya built entire calendar systems around celestial movements only visible after dark, orienting cities like Chichen Itza to align with specific star and planetary positions. Their observatory tracked Venus with extraordinary precision, a planet associated with warfare and major political decisions. The night sky wasn't decoration. It was political and military intelligence. In ancient Mesopotamia, a specialized class of priest scholars dedicated themselves to reading the night sky for omens, comets, eclipses, planetary movements, all carrying messages about war, planting, and treaties. Wrong methodology, but the instinct was genuine science, finding patterns in natural phenomena to make better decisions. And Polynesian navigators did something that's almost hard to believe without instruments of any kind, no compass, no sextant, no GPS, crossing thousands of miles of open Pacific in wooden canoes, mostly at night, by memorizing the rising and setting positions of hundreds of stars across different seasons and latitudes, reading ocean swells with their bodies, and tracking birds that fly toward land at evening. They turned darkness into a library of information they could read fluently. One more detail that tends to land hard: Iron Age metalworkers in what's now Zimbabwe deliberately fired their forges at night, not from tradition, but because daylight washes out the subtle color changes in hot metal that tell you its exact temperature. At night, they could see those colors with perfect clarity. They were using darkness as a precision instrument. In ancient Mohenjo-Daro, sanitation workers collected waste specifically at night for practical reasons involving everyone else's quality of life. In Bronze Age Oman, farmers irrigated crops at night to reduce evaporation, loss, a genuinely intelligent water conservation strategy arrived at through pure observation. The Vikings burned fish oil and whale fat lamps through winter nights that in Scandinavia can stretch 18 to 20 hours. They didn't surrender to the dark. They industrialized their light sources and kept living through it. So when we imagine ancient humans at night, we usually picture something small and scared people huddled on rocks, passively waiting for morning, enduring the dark rather than inhabiting it. That's exactly backwards. The night was when humans told the stories that became culture, when they slept in two natural phases and woke in the middle to think, to pray, to connect. When they held each other warm against cold that would otherwise kill them. When priests rid the sky for messages from the divine. When navigators crossed the Pacific by starlight. When metalworkers used darkness to see more clearly. When farmers irrigated by moonlight. And every single morning, the sun kept its end of the bargain. The night wasn't empty, it was full. A different world with its own rules, its own skills, its own kind of meaning. One that human beings mapped and mastered over hundreds of thousands of years. We traded most of that away for electric light, which was absolutely worth it. Running water, antibiotics, the internet, real advantages. But something genuine got lost in how completely we collapsed the line between day and night. How little most of us now know about the sky above our heads, or the natural rhythms of our own bodies left to their own devices. So the next time you wake up at 3 a.m., inexplicably alert, thoughts moving clearly through your mind, don't panic. Don't reach for your phone. Just lie there in the dark for a little while. You're not malfunctioning. You're remembering.